Welcome back to the Loud Lens. I'm Khandie, and if you're new here, this is the podcast where we talk about things that photographers actually talk about, where photography is spoken about when the camera's off, no one's performing for Instagram. There's real talk, no filters, no toxic positivity, no pretending the industry is all golden hour and amazing clients. If this is your vibe, welcome, stick around. Today's episode, though, is one that I've been thinking about since I saw a conversation in a Facebook group that genuinely stopped me in my tracks in like a shock, horror kind of way, and not a good way. And it's something that we really need to think about and talk about. It's one of those. We're talking about retirement, specifically why photographers aren't planning for it, why creatives broadly have this blind spot when it comes to their financial future, what the aging creative generation is walking into without realizing it, what the pandemic should have taught us but apparently didn't stick with us, what the government situation actually looks like for us self employed people, and what we can actually do about this. Practically no waffle. This is going to be a longer episode. Go get a coffee and whiskey, a tea, whatever it is, because settle in. This is a conversation the industry needs to have. And I'd rather have it honestly than give you some tiny 10-minute waffly one that doesn't actually say anything. So we need to get in deep. I'm going to be honest, I have tried to re record this episode 7 times. So let's hope 8th time is a charm. It's because I wrote the script, because I script these, I have to research them quite a lot. And I just got lost in it all, and my brain started to hurt, and I just went, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, let's try for take 8. The Facebook group, the moment where it all started. So it's a Facebook group for photographers, like I said, and somebody very innocently posted the question, when are you all planning to retire? How do you think you're going to leave this industry? And I sat there and I read the responses. And look, I wasn't expecting someone to give me like some fully mapped out financial strategy. I wasn't expecting spreadsheets and a pension forecast in the comments, but I was expecting something, anything, some indication that people had thought about this, that they had a direction, a plan, even if it was a rough, janky one. I just wanted a plan. What I got instead was a lot of, I'll retire when my body gives out, and a lot of, I'm starting to think about dropping weddings because it's doing my back and knees in. A lot of, I'll just keep going for as long as I can. And it's this one that I kept coming back to. A lot of complete silence on the question actually happened as well because no one knew what to do. And I want to be very, very clear. I am not judging those people. I'm not sitting here thinking they're stupid or irresponsible. I'm thinking, hey, this is a systemic. Oh, we almost had to go back and re-record this systemic problem that is what the industry has. This is what happens when an industry is entirely built on passion without business structure. I'm just going to say it. This is what happens when nobody teaches you the full picture of what it means to run a business. Okay. What it actually means, not a hobby, but running it as a business. Now, I'm also sitting here thinking we need to have a very different conversation because I'll keep going till my body stops is not a retirement plan. It is a crisis deferment. Okay. That is a problem when you are handing it to your future self at the worst possible time when you have the least energy and the least options available. And the photography industry, the creative industry broadly, is full of people doing exactly that. And it worries me. And it genuinely worries me. And this is where this episode comes from, not from judgment, but from concern, care, and compassion. And from the belief that if we can talk honestly about money, pricing, about marketing, and the stuff that no one else in this industry wants to say out loud, we need to talk about this too. This is what the loud lens was created for. Okay. So let's go into the whole business education gap and learning, okay, before it's too late. Now, let me start with what I think is the root cause of all of this, because I don't think the retirement planning problem exists in isolation. I think it's a system, or I should say, a symptom of something much bigger, much larger, which is the vast majority of photographers come into running a business without ever being taught how to do that, how to run a business. I know it sounds pretty harsh, but think about how most photographers actually end up being where they are. You might pick up a camera, go, oh, this is nice. Maybe it was a hobby, maybe a creative outlet. Maybe someone said, hey, you've got a good eye. So you start getting better. You do a little few shoots with some friends and family, and someone offers to pay you, and you say yes. And at some point, maybe gradually, slowly, or maybe quite suddenly, because you're bloody talented, you look around and realize you're technically running a business, but no one handed you a manual. Nobody went, hey, dude, this is how you do it. This is how a business is actually run. Here's what you need to know about tax. Here's what you need to know about contracts, how they protect you, how to price your work so you're making money, not just staying busy. I'm not even going to touch that today, really. What financial planning looks like for a self employed person. Here's what happens tomorrow if everything stops and you have no money for 3 months. None of that. You learn it all on the job, and you learned it in the wrong order, which is to say you learn it reactively. You learn it because you got burnt out by a client or something went wrong or you didn't realize about planning and you didn't learn about pricing and then you suddenly realized you were working 60 hours a week and weren't making any money, but you were very busy. You learned about tax when HMRC came knocking, whatever it is. And I say all of this from a place of direct experience, by the way. I came into this industry from a military background, which gave me a certain level of discipline and a way of thinking about structure and planning. But even I had to learn business of photography the hard way. Even I had moments of, oh, damn, I should have known that earlier. Whoops. The difference is that my background meant I was predisposed thinking about systems and strategy, and a lot of photographers aren't. And I have to recognize that privilege, okay? A lot of photographers come into this because they're creative, visual, intuitive people, and the financial strategic side of business does not come naturally. That is not a character flaw, all right? That is just not where their brain or interest lives. But that's a problem when you're learning the basics of business, when you are figuring out how to price a session, how to write a contract, how to market yourself, how to manage a client from inquiry to final gallery. Retirement planning is about 900th on the list of things you're dealing with. It's not that you don't care about it. It's just that there are 17 million of urgent fires to put out, and the retirement fire feels so far off. But then it's 10 years have passed, then it's 15, and suddenly that fire is looking quite close. This is a trap. It is not unique to photography, it is self-employment trap broadly, but I think it is particularly acute in the creative industries because there's an additional layer of, how do I say it? I'm doing it because I love it, not because I'm building a financial asset. And that mindset, that framing photography as a vocation rather than a business, makes it very easy to deprioritize the strategic and financial thinking that every business owner actually needs. I know this is heavy. I know it's heavy, my darling, but we gotta do this. I don't know how else to jazz up retirement for you, okay? I have said it before on this podcast, and I'll keep saying it. You are not just a photographer. The moment you start charging for your work, you are a business owner, and business owners need to plan, not just for the next quarter, not just for the next busy season, but for the long term, for the end game, for the day when they want to, or dare I say, have to step back. And most of us have not been having that conversation. And the longer we don't have it, the worse the options get. Now, I want to talk about the pandemic, and I know it triggers a lot of people, so I'm going to say this as nice as I can. And it's not a fun topic, it isn't. But because I think it was the single most important business lesson that this industry has ever had in recent times, and I'm not convinced we actually learned from it. How's your mind back to when everything stopped? When it's not just slowed down, it stopped. Weddings were cancelled. Events stopped altogether. Studios shut. Corporate clients disappeared. Portrait bookings, nothing. And for a huge proportion of photographers, the income went from whatever it was to zero almost overnight. And what it revealed, what it laid completely bare, was just how thin the financial foundations were for a lot of people in this industry. There was no buffer. There were no savings that could absorb even 1 month of no income, let alone 3 or 6 or more. And I want to be clear again. I'm not saying that to be cruel because the government support for self employed people during that period was not adequate. It was late. It was patchy. It excluded people who've recently gone self employed, and it certainly wasn't designed for the reality of a photographer's income structure. So a lot of people were let down by system that should have caught them. But, and this is a significant but, the underlying vulnerability, the no buffer, the no savings, the no financial resilience, that wasn't created by the pandemic. COVID just exposed it. And that was already there. It was already that's the question I keep asking during that period. I kept asking, and I'll keep asking now, how many people looked at that experience and thought, right, I need to restructure how I run my business so I'm never exposed like that again? Because from what I see, from conversation in groups like this one that sparked this episode, from what people post online, from what photographers talk about at industry events, a lot of people just went back to how it was before. The bookings came back, the income came back, and the urgency for building financial resilience faded. That is human, though. That's genuinely human. When pressure lifts, the lesson often lifts with it. It's very hard to maintain a discipline of building a buffer when the immediate crisis has passed and there's work coming in. I get that. But what concerns me in the context of this episode, if photographers didn't build a financial safety net after the most dramatic demonstration and living memory of why they needed one, what does that say about the likelihood of them building a retirement plan? The pandemic was a brutal, horrible, if you like, rehearsal. I'm not saying it's like as flippantly as that, but I'm trying to find a word in which to do it, right? It shows exactly what happens when income stops unexpectedly. And retirement, your own retirement, is a version of some description of that. It's income stopping intentionally, hopefully on your terms, but stopping nonetheless. And if you don't have the financial infrastructure to sustain yourself without client bookings coming in, retirement won't be a plan. It will be a fantasy. Photographers who managed to come through the pandemic in the best shape, I'm not saying any of us really did, by large, were the ones who had, even if accidentally, built some kind of financial resilience, multiple income streams, some savings, intellectual property, courses, presets, books that generated passive income when they weren't shooting, business models that had some flexi built into them, people who taught photography online, on TikTok, on social media like I did. Okay, I'm not saying I came through it great, but it certainly helped me. Those things didn't happen by accident. They happened because someone thought about what their business needs to look like beyond just the next booking. They're the same things that make a good retirement plan. The things that's what a good retirement needs to be built on. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this right now is that COVID, the pandemic, already told you what your retirement will feel like if you don't plan for it. You already had the preview. The question is whether you're going to do anything about it. Now, I do want to talk about something that is a little personal, the aging creative generation and the reality of our government. I want to talk about something that I think is hovering in the background of all of this, but no one really wants to say it. We, and I mean the photography industry, the creative industry, the self-employed people broadly, we're all going to get older. And the context of us getting older is not the context of our grandparents or parents, what they retired into is quite significantly worse. And I think a lot of people haven't fully reckoned with that yet. Let me paint this picture. A significant chunk of a working photographer's population in this country is around their 40s and 50s. Some are in their 60s. A lot of them come into photography as a second career. They left a corporate job, they took redundancy, they had a life change, or they decided to do something that they've always wanted to do, which means they've come into self employment later, which means potentially they have gaps in their national insurance record, which means their state pension entitlement might not be what they're assuming. So here's where it gets really uncomfortable. The state pension isn't going to be what our parents' generation experienced, and even they're experiencing a terrible one. The retirement age has gone up. There are ongoing conversations about whether it goes up again. The triple lock, the mechanism that protects the state pension value, is politically contested and has already been suspended once. The amount you actually get from a state pension, even if you qualify for it on full, is not enough to live on comfortably in most parts of this country. It is a supplement. It was always designed as a supplement. It was never designed to be someone's entire retirement income. And yet, I say this based on the conversation I've had with people in these groups, the general vibe of how photographers talk about their financial future when I talk to them is I think a lot of self-employed people at some level are quietly banking on the state pension being there for them as if it's going to be enough, as if it's going to cover it. It won't. I'm sorry, but it won't. And for self employed people specifically, there's another layer to this. If you're employed, your employer contributes to your pension through auto enrollment. It's not optional, it happens. You might not be putting as much in, but something is going in and your employer is adding to it. If you're self employed, nothing happens automatically. You have to set it up, you have to fund yourself, you have to make the active decision to put money away regularly into a vehicle that will grow over time, that it will be there when you need it because no employer is matching contributions. Every penny in your pension is a penny you choose to put there. How many self-employed people do you think have a pension? How many actually sit down and worked out what they need to put away every month from now until they want to retire to make a meaningful pot to draw from? I'm going to guess, and this is a guess, but I think it's quite an educated one, not many and not nearly enough. The time pressure is here is real. Compound interest is the most powerful financial force available to a regular person who isn't wealthy, but it works on time. The earlier you start putting money into a pension, the harder the money works for you because it has more time to grow. And every year you wait is a year of compounding that you lose. If you're in your 20s, you start now, even small amounts can grow to something substantial. If you're in your 40s and 50s, you haven't started one, which is reality for a lot of photographers who came into the self-employment later, you're playing catch up. You can still build something, but you need to start now, not next year. I will say, please go speak to a financial advisor because there's lots of different advice on this. I'm just telling you what I personally believe in this. But on top of all this, I want to mention something very specific to the photography industry, the physical reality of the work, because a lot of photographers, particularly wedding photographers, sports photographers, event photographers, are doing physically demanding work, heavy kit, long hours on your feet, carrying bags, getting into awkward positions to get the shot. and bodies age. That's not pessimism, that's just biology. Photographers in that group were talking about dropping weddings because their backs hurt. They're not being dramatic. That is a real conversation that happens in this industry. And the question that follows on from that is what happens when you can no longer do shoots that generate the most income for you? Is the one that I think needs a financial answer, not just a physical one. This is why I keep coming back to the idea that retirement planning for a photographer isn't just about a distant future. It's about building a business model that doesn't rely entirely on you being physically able to be on your feet for 12 hours at a stretch. That's not a retirement plan, that's a ticking clock. Okay. But I want to identify problems. I think there's an identity problem when your work is who you are, okay? So this is a section I want to spend some real time on because I think it's emotional core as to why this problem exists. It is not something that gets very talked about, honestly. So a lot of photographers, a lot of creators have built their entire sense of self around what they do. Photography isn't just a job, it's who they are. It's how they introduce themselves at parties. It's how they think about, it's what they think about when they wake up in the morning. It's the lens, no pun intended, through which they see and interpret their world. So when your work is that deeply woven into your identity, the idea of stopping or slowing down doesn't feel like a professional change. It feels like a threat to who you are. And I think this is why the whole "I'll keep going till I physically can't" is such a common answer, because the alternative, actually deciding to stop at some point in a way of your choosing, requires confronting the question of what happens after. And if you've never separated your sense of self from your work, that question can be genuinely terrifying. I've had this conversation quietly off the record with photographers who are in their 60s and 70s and still shooting everything they can get their hands on, not because they need the money necessarily, but because they don't know who they are without that camera. And I understand that. I genuinely understand it. Photography is an extraordinarily creative practice and it can be deeply meaningful. I am not dismissing that. But there is a difference between choosing to keep shooting because you love it and have the energy and the financial courage to do it at whatever pace you want, and shooting because you're afraid to stop, because stopping means confronting an identity that you've never built outside of this work. And the practical consequence is that identity fusion is that it makes retirement planning almost psychologically impossible for some people, because to plan for retirement is to admit that you won't be doing this forever. To admit that you aren't always going to be doing this so looking at a version of yourself that you don't know yet, and it's uncomfortable. So it's so much easier to not ever think about it. So I want to offer a reframe here because I think the way most people think about retirement, particularly in this industry, is wrong, and the wrong framing makes it harder to engage with. Retirement doesn't mean stopping. It doesn't have to at all. Retirement is optional. It's an ability to choose what you do with your time on your terms without the financial desperation driving the decision. For a photographer, retirement might mean fewer shoots, more teaching. It might mean licensing your archive, generating income from work you've already created. It might mean speaking, something I can speak to personally, or writing or running workshops, mentoring. It can mean shooting purely personal projects with no commercial pressure. It might mean doing one or two meaningful, carefully chosen commissions a year for clients you genuinely love them rather than taking everything that comes because you need the money. What it most certainly doesn't have to mean is put the camera down forever and sit in front of daytime TV and mold into the sofa. But, and this is a critical but, all of these versions of a slower, more sustainable, creative life cost money. And that money needs to come from somewhere. And if you haven't built a financial foundation to support that option, none of these choices will actually be available to you when you retire. You don't retire. You will just have to keep working till you can't, which brings us exactly back to where we started. So the identity reframe I'd offer is this: planning your retirement is not planning to stop being a photographer. It's planning to stay in control of your own story. It's making sure that the decisions you make about your career in the future are made from a position of choice rather than financial necessity. Because there is nothing sadder, and I have seen it in this industry and others, when someone who would deeply love to slow down, to step back, to spend their energy differently, but someone who can't because they have to keep going, because the alternative is financial hardship, because they built a career but not a future. We don't want you like that. You deserve better than that. So let's talk about building that future and what it actually looks like. What can we actually do? The practical stuff. So this is the practical session where it gets real. So stay with me. I know this is a longer episode, but I think it's so important. I want to preface this by saying, once again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an accountant. I'm a photographer with a business brain and a background in strategy and a very firm opinion that this industry needs to think differently about its financial future. So, everything I say here is a starting point for a conversation you should then have with a professional, my loves, okay? Do not take my word as gospel. I know you love it when I preach you. I know you're like, Khandie, you are the shining light I needed. But honestly, take this very seriously and go speak to a professional, all right? With that being said, let's go. Number one, know where you actually stand. Before you plan for that future, you need to know what the present looks like. Not a vague feeling, not an optimistic assumption. Actually, no. Go check your national insurance record. You can do that on the government website. There's even something called checkyourstatepension.gov.uk. I'm swear it's something there. It takes like 5 minutes. It gives you how many qualifying years you have, what your current state pension forecast is, whether there are any gaps you can fill in by voluntary contributions. Do this today after this episode because the number you find there might be different to what you're expecting. And it's much better to know now than find out later when the options are limited. All right. I might actually do that. I need to do that. I wrote this episode and I was like, actually, yeah, I do need to do that. So note to self, I'm going to do that next. Similarly, if you've had any previous pensions from previous employments, from before you were self-employed, find it. There's something like 2.8 billion pounds worth of lost pension pots in the UK. Money that people have just lost track of because they changed jobs and never transferred it. The government has a pension tracing service. Use it. And know what you've got because you can't build on something you can't see. Number two, start a pension if you haven't got one and add to it if you have. Now, I know, please understand, again, speak to a financial advisor, it might be viable for everybody. I know this sounds basic, but basic things don't get done. If you're self-employed and do not have a private pension, an SIPP, a stakeholder pension, whatever the right vehicle is for your circumstances, this, whatever it is, right? This needs to be a priority conversation you have with your financial advisor. And if you do have one, when did you last look at your pension? When did you last contribute? When did you last increase your contributions? When did you last check that it was performing, whether it was in the right funds for your time and whether the amount was going in was actually going to produce the pot you actually were going to need? Most people set up a pension and then don't look at it for years. That is not enough. This needs to be a thing you review at least annually, ideally with someone who knows what they're doing. The contribution question is one I really want to push because a lot of self-employed people who do have a pension are significantly underpaying into it. Because when you're managing cash flow yourself, when the months are good, when the months are lean, it's easy to treat the pension contribution as a flexible line in the budget, the one that gets reduced when things are tight. And over the years, it adds up to a lot of missing money. There are calculators to help. The Money Helper website has a good one that you can show roughly what you need to be contributing now at your age to hit a particular target pot by a particular retirement age. I really need you encouraged to go run those numbers because the figure you need to be putting in might be surprising. And it's better to be surprised now with time to adjust than later. Three, building a financial buffer separate to everything else. Your pension is for retirement. Your financial buffer is for right now, for the gaps, the quiet season, the unexpected costs, the next pandemic or the recession or whatever life throws at you. The general guidance for self-employed people is 3 to 6 months of operating costs in accessible savings, not invested, not locked away, accessible. So that if the income stops, you have runway. You have time to respond without making desperate decisions. I know it feels like an enormous amount of money that should be just sitting in a saving account doing relatively little. I know it's hard to build that money up when cash flow is inconsistent, but start somewhere. Even 1 month's money saved is better than none. Build it gradually. A percentage of each payment you receive set aside automatically before you do anything else with it. Pay yourself last in the pecking order. The buffer goes first. Okay. Four, think about what your business could generate beyond your own time. This is the one I think has the most potential for photographers, particularly, and the one that gets talked about the least, oddly. Right now, for most photographers, income is almost entirely dependent on their actual time, physical presence. You shoot, you get paid. You don't shoot, you don't get paid. There's almost no income that doesn't require you actively showing up and doing a thing. That model has a ceiling. It's a physical ceiling, your body, and a time ceiling that there are only so many hours in a week. And as you get older, both those ceilings start to get lower. So the question I want you to sit with is what could your business generate with you without you actually doing anything? Or actually doing it, should I say? Or at the least, what can you do without high which doesn't have a high physical demand? Okay. Some questions, and then these are genuinely options, not fantasies. Education. If you know things and you do things because you've been doing it for years, teach them online courses, workshops, webinars, educational content. It takes time to build, but once it's built, it can generate income repeatedly from a single effort. I know something like about this. Obviously, my books exist. Their content exists and it continues to generate something along the lines of the initial work is done. I'm getting income from it. Licensing, if you've been shooting for years, you have an archive. That archive has a potential commercial value for, I don't know, editorial use, for stock, for licensing for brands. Most photographers never properly explore this. Their archive sits on hard drives and does nothing, and that's a missed opportunity. Speaking and appearances, if you have an expertise and a voice, and this podcast is evidence that you might, speaking at industry events, conferences, educational programs is another form of income that doesn't require a camera around your neck. It requires you to show up and talk, which is a lot easier as you build a reputation. It's not harder. Passive digital products, presets, templates, guides, workbooks, things that are created once and sold repeatedly, and again takes time to build. And the economics over time are very different from one-to-one client work. I'm not suggesting you all do these. I'm suggesting that you think about which of these makes sense to you and start building to them now. Not when you're 16 exhausted and need the income to be there. Now, while you have the energy, the time perhaps, and the capacity to build something properly, because every income stream you build doesn't depend entirely on your physical presence in front of a client, is a brick in your retirement foundation. Okay. 5, talk to a financial advisor, an actual one. I've said it before and I'm going to say it again more specifically. Not just any financial advisor, one who understands self employment, one who understands irregular income, one who can look into your specific situation, your age, your NI record, your existing pension provision, if any, your assets, your business structure, and give you actual personalized guidance. I think there's even a charity that has a list of regulated financial advisors in the UK. I want to say it's called Unbiased, but off the top of my head, I didn't put this in the script. I also think the Money Helper website has got some government backing, has free guidance tools, and you can help you understand options. But yeah, this is not optional. This is a business decision. If you go speak to this advisor, you would not try to do your own tax return without understanding the rules, right? You would not sign a contract without reading it. You would not try to plan your financial future without professional input. The stakes are too high and the variables are too many. I know financial advice costs money, and I think it feels like one of those things when you're already stretched, but the cost of getting it right is a fraction of the cost of getting it wrong. Number 6, have the conversation with yourself seriously and genuinely have it. What do you actually want your later career to look like? Not what you think you should want, not the Instagram version. What do you actually want? Do you want to keep shooting at full pace in your 60s and beyond? Maybe. Some people genuinely do. Fine. But then you need to be building towards a business model that can sustain that and a financial cushion, which means you're doing it because you want to, not because you have no choice. Do you want to slow down, to shoot less and teach more, to create more, or just have more time? Great. What does that transition look like? When does it need to start? When does it need to be in place for it to be possible for you? Do you have a number, like an actual number that represents what you need in a pension pot to retire comfortably at an age you'd actually like to retire? Most people don't. Most people have never done a calculation, right, like this. And without a target, it's almost impossible to build a plan. Sit down with a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, whatever's your thing, and try to answer these questions honestly. What does your later life look like? What would it cost? How far are you close to funding it? Would you be able to change and start now to close that gap? It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? It really doesn't. It doesn't have to be some fully formed plan from day one, but it does need a starting point, a direction, something to build towards rather than nothing. Okay? Section 7. This is long. I know it's long, but it's really important. And I was really shocked on that post, what I was seeing. And people were like, why are you shocked? I'm like, because I am. I am the bigger picture, what it says about industry. I want to zoom out a bit because before we wrap this up, because I think the retirement planning problem is a window into something broader about the photography industry and creative industries generally. We have, and I say this with love because I'm in this industry and I care about it, a cultural problem with money, with talking about money, with valuing your work, what it actually worth, and treating photography as a business rather than a calling. And that problem shows up everywhere. It shows up in chronic charging. It shows up in reluctance to put prices up on websites. It shows up in the way photographers will spend thousands on gear and almost nothing on business education. It shows up in the community culture that celebrates the work and never talks about whether the person creating the work is financially sustainable. It absolutely shows up in the retirement planning gap because retirement planning is fundamentally a business question. It is the ultimate business question. What is this thing worth over the long term? And how do I build it in a way that creates lasting value? And if we're not asking that question about our pricing or a financial structure or a financial management, or of course, we are not talking. We're not asking it about retirement, but we need to. We need to, really need to, because we are not getting younger. A lot of us are not young anymore. And the world we're aging into is not generous. The government provision is not going to be sufficient. The physical demands of the work are real, and the window in which changes made now will make a meaningful difference is closing, not opening. And I don't want to be this all to be doom and gloom. And I say it because I think the photographers who hear this and take it seriously, ones who actually go in and check their NI record and find a financial advisor and start having the conversation, those photographers are going to have options, real options, and the ability to choose what their later career looks like based on their terms. And that's worth fighting for. That's worth having a conversation for. Okay. So anyway, let's bring this in because I this is what I want you to do after this episode. Not a list of 10 things, 3 things. Go check your national insurance record on the Gov site today, right now, if you can. Know where you stand. 2, make an appointment with a financial advisor, someone who's qualified, someone who understands self-employment, and have the conversation about your pension, if you have one, your retirement timeline, and what you need to do differently. And if you don't know where to start, go look on unbiased.co.uk and moneyhelper.org.uk. I think that's the website. And then 3, sit with a question of what your business could generate beyond your own time and physical presence. Start thinking about what you're building, not just what you're earning. That's it. 3 things. They're not complicated, but they are urgent. More urgent than most people in this industry are treating them. I love this industry. I love what photography is. I love what it can be. I love what it does for people who do it. But love for your craft is not financial strategy, and passion does not pay for a comfortable retirement. Plan for it, build it, start it now. Okay, that's it from me. As always, some real talk, no fluff. You deserve honesty more than you deserve to be made comfortable. I know it sounds really awful, but I mean it. Until next time, I will keep just go do it. Go check your NI, okay? This has been the Loud Lens. I've been Khandie. And we did it at take 8. Yes, we've done it. Oh wait, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this one. Yeah. And come see me whenever I'm talking. Because you might understand why I'm doing more talking now.